Let's begin our journey together, right here, in this very moment. First, find a comfortable position, and let's take one slow, conscious breath together. Take a long, deep breath in, drawing the cool, clean air deep into your body, feeling your chest and belly expand with life and stillness. And now, a long, slow, complete breath out, releasing the day, letting go of all the thoughts, all the worries, all the plans, just letting them dissolve into the quiet air around you. As you settle in, you can, if you wish, share in your mind where you are listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. By acknowledging this simple fact, we ground ourselves in the present, creating a shared space of tranquility that stretches across cities and continents, across different times and different seasons, all connected by this single, shared intention to find rest. Tonight, we travel back in time, not just to hear a story, but to walk alongside the Buddha on a path of profound courage and compassion. This is a true story from the ancient texts, a story of a great darkness and an even greater light. It is the story of a man who was feared by all and the unwavering peace that transformed him. There is nothing for you to do now but to listen, to breathe, and to allow the gentle rhythm of this story to guide you into a deep, healing, and restorative sleep. In the time of the Buddha, the prosperous kingdom of Kosala, ruled by the just king Pasenadi, was shrouded in a palpable veil of fear. The capital city, Shravasti, once a vibrant hub of life where merchants called out their wares and children's laughter echoed in the sun-drenched streets, had fallen under a chilling silence. The fear had a name whispered in hushed, terrified tones in the safety of locked homes: Angulimala. He was a man who had become a demon, a ruthless killer who haunted the great Jalini forest that bordered the kingdom. But he was no ordinary bandit who killed for gold or jewels. His motive was a twisted, terrifying vow, and his gruesome trademark was a garland he wore around his neck, a garland made from the fingers of his victims. With each life he took, he added another finger to this horrifying necklace, and his goal was to reach 1,000. The number had already climbed to 999. Only one more was needed to complete his vow. The forest of Jalini, once a place where woodsmen gathered timber and children foraged for berries, had become a place of death. The roads that passed through it were now utterly deserted. Trade between towns had ceased. Entire villages on the edge of the forest had been abandoned, their homes left to the wind and the creeping vines. The fear was a cold mist that seeped into every corner of the kingdom, a constant, low hum of anxiety that stole the joy from festivals and the peace from quiet evenings. The king had sent his best soldiers, brave men in shining armor with sharp spears, but they never returned. Angulimala was said to be as swift as a forest deer and as strong as a wild boar, a phantom of vengeance who could not be caught. Grief was a constant visitor in every home as the kingdom waited in collective dread for the news of the final victim. While this shadow of terror lengthened over the land, the Buddha was residing nearby, at the Jetavana Monastery, a beautiful grove of trees that had been gifted to him and his community of monks. The monastery was an island of profound peace in this ocean of fear. Here, the only sounds were the gentle sweeping of leaves, the soft chanting of monks in meditation, and the Buddha's compassionate teachings, which flowed like a clear, cool stream. The monks, however, were not immune to the kingdom's fear. They heard the stories from the lay people who brought them their daily alms, their faces etched with worry. They spoke of Angulimala, and a quiet tension began to permeate even the serene atmosphere of the monastery. One morning, as the Buddha was preparing to go on his alms round, he overheard a group of villagers talking in hushed, desperate voices.
A mother was weeping. Her son had not returned from the forest edge. The fear was no longer a distant story. It was a present and painful reality. The Buddha stood for a moment, his eyes closed, a deep, unwavering stillness in his presence. His monks saw a look of profound compassion on his face, a compassion that was not pity, but a deep, resonant understanding of the suffering that gripped both the terrified kingdom and the tormented man in the forest. Then, without a word, he picked up his simple robe and his alms bowl and began to walk. But he did not turn towards the city. He turned towards the dark and silent path that led directly into the heart of the Jalini forest. The monks, seeing his intention, rushed to his side. "Venerable sir, where are you going? Surely not into the Jalini forest. Angulimala is there. He shows no mercy to anyone, not even to monks. He will surely harm you. It is certain death." The villagers who had gathered also cried out, begging him to turn back. Even a company of 40 or 50 armed men dare not travel that road, they warned, their voices trembling. "He will kill you, and we will lose our teacher." The Buddha listened to their pleas with a gentle, serene patience. His gaze was soft, but his resolve was as unshakable as the mountain. He looked at their fearful faces and said, his voice calm and clear, "The fear you feel is understandable, but compassion must not be limited by fear. A fire of hatred and delusion is burning in that forest, and it is consuming a man. I go to offer him a different path." And with those words, he continued his steady, mindful walk, leaving his frightened followers behind. His every step was a meditation. He was not marching into danger. He was walking into a field of suffering, carrying nothing but the shield of his boundless compassion and the sword of his unwavering wisdom. The walk into the Jalini forest was a journey into a cathedral of silence and shadow. Ancient trees, their trunks thick as pillars, formed a dense canopy overhead, allowing only thin, dappled shafts of sunlight to reach the forest floor. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth, decaying leaves, and the sharp, clean scent of pine. The usual sounds of the forest, the chatter of monkeys, the call of birds, were absent. It was an eerie, listening silence, a silence born not of peace, but of fear. The very trees seemed to be holding their breath. The Buddha walked with complete, mindful presence. He was aware of the crunch of dry leaves under his bare feet, the feeling of the cool air on his skin, the sight of a spider spinning its web in a shaft of light. His mind was not in the past, regretting his decision, nor was it in the future, anticipating the confrontation. It was fully, completely here, in the simple, profound act of walking. He was radiating a field of peace so powerful that it seemed to subtly alter the very atmosphere of the forest. From a high vantage point, hidden amongst the dense foliage, Angulimala saw him. He had been watching the path for days, growing more and more agitated, needing only one more victim to complete his terrible vow. He had seen soldiers and merchants before, their faces tight with fear, their hands gripping their weapons. But this was different. He saw a lone monk, walking calmly, without a weapon, without any haste, his expression one of complete serenity. A strange mix of rage and disbelief surged through Angulimala. Rage at the monk's audacity to enter his domain, and disbelief at the utter lack of fear. What arrogance, he thought. This monk walks as if he owns the forest. I will make him my final victim. A monk's finger will be a worthy conclusion to my garland. With this thought, he grabbed his sword and his shield and began to descend, moving through the trees with a terrifying, silent speed. The Buddha continued his calm, measured pace. Angulimala, a man known for his incredible swiftness, began to run. He was sure he would overtake the monk in a matter of moments, but a strange and miraculous thing began to happen. Though the Buddha was only walking at a normal, unhurried pace, Angulimala could not catch him. He ran as fast as he could, his legs pumping, his heart pounding in his chest, but the distance between them remained the same. It was as if the ground itself was stretching out before the Buddha and shrinking behind Angulimala. He pushed himself harder, running with all his might, the garland of fingers bouncing gruesomely against his chest, sweat pouring down his face. Yet, the serene, saffron-robed figure ahead of him remained just out of reach, walking with an effortless grace. The physical paradox shattered Angulimala's confidence. For the first time, he felt a flicker of a different kind of fear. Not the fear of an enemy, but the fear of the unknown, the incomprehensible. His rage began to mix with a profound, frustrating bewilderment. Finally, exhausted and completely confounded, he stopped. He leaned on his sword, breathing heavily, and shouted out, his voice a raw, angry command that echoed through the silent forest. "Stop, monk! Stop where you are!" The Buddha, without breaking his stride, continued to walk a few more paces. Then he too stopped. He turned slowly, his face radiating an immense and gentle peace, his eyes meeting the killer's gaze without a trace of fear or judgment. And in a voice that was as calm and clear as the forest stream, he replied, "I have stopped, Angulimala. It is you who have not." The words hung in the air, simple yet infinitely profound. Angulimala was stunned into silence. What did he mean? He was the one standing still, and the monk was the one who had just stopped walking. "What do you mean by that, monk?" he demanded, his voice laced with confusion. "You are still walking, and yet you say you have stopped. I am the one who has stopped, yet you say I have not. What is this riddle?" The Buddha's gaze softened with compassion. "Angulimala," he said, and it was the first time in a long time anyone had spoken his name without screaming in terror. "I have stopped in the way that matters. I have stopped creating harm for all living beings. I have laid down the weapon of hatred, the poison of ill will, and the burden of cruelty. My journey of violence is over. But you, my friend, you have not stopped. You continue to run in the endless, exhausting circle of violence, of anger, of causing suffering to others and to yourself. You have stopped your feet, but you have not stopped your heart. I am asking you to truly stop." Each word from the Buddha was like a gentle drop of water on a stone of hardened rage. Angulimala had been met with fear, with hatred, with violence his entire life. He had never ever been met with this kind of fearless, unconditional compassion. The paradox of the chase, the monk's unwavering serenity, and the profound, piercing truth of his words combined to shatter the very foundations of Angulimala's reality. He looked at the garland of fingers around his neck, and for the first time he did not see trophies of his power. He saw 999 stories of immense sorrow, of mothers weeping for their sons, of husbands lost to their wives. He saw the terrible weight of the suffering he had caused. The sword fell from his numb fingers, clattering onto the rocky ground. The shield slid from his arm. A great shuddering sob escaped his chest, a sound of grief so immense it seemed to come from the very earth. The rage, the madness, the delusion that had driven him for so long finally broke. He collapsed at the Buddha's feet, his face pressed into the dirt, and he wept. He wept for his victims. He wept for their families, and he wept for the lost, tormented man that he had become. When his tears were spent, he looked up at the Buddha, his eyes now clear of madness, filled only with a deep, bottomless remorse. "I have done terrible things," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "My path is darkness." The Buddha knelt down, and in an act that shocked the very heavens, he gently reached out and placed his hand on the trembling killer's shoulder. "The past is like a dream from which you are now awakening. The future is not yet written. The only moment that matters is this one. And in this moment, you have chosen to stop. In this moment, you have chosen a different path. And for that, there is not only forgiveness, but welcome." Angulimala looked up, his face a mask of disbelief. "Welcome? Welcome where?" he asked. The Buddha smiled, a smile that seemed to illuminate the dark forest. "Welcome home," he said.
Welcome to the path of peace. And there, in the heart of the forest of terror, the Buddha accepted the most feared man in the kingdom into his community of monks. He ordained him, helping him to cut the gruesome garland from his neck and letting it fall to the forest floor like a dead snake. He shaved his head, a symbol of letting go of his old identity, and he gave him a new name, Ahimsaka, which means the harmless one or the non-violent one. The transformation was radical and immediate, but the path ahead for Ahimsaka was not easy. When he returned to the monastery with the Buddha, the other monks were terrified. They could not believe that this was the same man who had terrorized the kingdom. King Pasenadi himself came to the monastery with a small army, ready to finally hunt down and kill Angulimala, only to find him sitting peacefully in a saffron robe, his face serene, radiating a quiet humility. The king was so moved by the power of the Buddha's compassion that he bowed to both the Buddha and to the newly ordained monk. But the world outside the monastery was not so quick to forgive. The real test of Ahimsaka's transformation came when he had to walk for his daily alms in the very villages where he had once spread terror. The past was not so easily erased. When the villagers saw him, their fear would turn to rage. They could not see the peaceful monk. They could only see the monster who had murdered their loved ones. They would shout curses at him. They would throw stones, sticks, and garbage at him. On his alms round, Ahimsaka would return to the monastery not with a bowl full of food, but with a body covered in cuts and bruises, his robes torn and stained. In the early days, the old anger would sometimes flicker within him. The urge to retaliate, to use the strength that was still in his arms, was a powerful ghost. He would go to the Buddha, his heart in turmoil. "Master," he would say, "they hate me. They will never forgive me. Perhaps I am not worthy of this path." The Buddha would look at him with unwavering compassion. "Ahimsaka," he would say, "what you are experiencing now is the fruit of your past actions ripening in this very life. The stones they throw at you are but a small fraction of the suffering you once caused. Bear it, my friend. Bear it with patience. Bear it with a forgiving heart. Let each stone be a reminder of the path you have left behind, and let your patient endurance be your practice. Do not let their anger reignite your own. Meet their hatred with your metta, your loving kindness." This became Ahimsaka's fierce practice. When he walked for alms, with each curse that was thrown at him, he would silently wish the person peace.
With each stone that struck his body, he would feel not anger, but a deep understanding of their pain, and he would silently send them compassion. He was burning away his heavy karma, not with rituals, but with the fire of patient, loving endurance. His body was being wounded, but his heart was being healed. One morning, on his alms round, Ahimsaka came across a young woman in a village who was in the midst of a very difficult and dangerous childbirth. She had been in labor for a long time, and her life and the life of her child were in peril. The family was desperate. Seeing the calm and peaceful monk, they rushed to him, begging him to help, to use whatever spiritual power he had. Ahimsaka's heart was filled with a deep compassion for the suffering woman, but he felt helpless. "I am just a simple monk," he said. "I have no knowledge of medicine." He hurried back to the monastery and told the Buddha of the woman's plight. The Buddha looked at him and gave him a very special instruction. "Go back to her, Ahimsaka," he said. "Stand before her and speak a statement of truth. Say these words: 'Sister, since the day I was born into this noble discipline of the enlightened ones, I do not recall intentionally taking the life of any living thing. By the power of this truth, may you be well, and may your baby be well." Ahimsaka was hesitant. "But Master," he said, "how can I say such a thing? I have taken so many lives. It would be a lie." The Buddha's gaze was gentle but firm. "When I say since the day you were born, I am not speaking of your first birth as the man called Angulimala. I am speaking of your second birth, your spiritual birth, the moment you put down the sword and took up the robe of a monk. Since that day, have you intentionally harmed any living thing?" Ahimsaka thought deeply. Since his ordination, despite the stones and the insults, he had not felt a moment of true hatred or ill will. He had only cultivated patience and compassion. "No, Venerable Sir," he said, "since that day I have not." "Then go," the Buddha said, "and speak this truth with a confident heart." Ahimsaka returned to the woman's house. He stood before her, and closing his eyes, he centered his mind, filling his heart with a powerful, focused compassion for her and her unborn child. Then, in a clear, steady voice, he spoke the words of truth. A palpable sense of peace filled the room, and miraculously, the difficult labor eased and a healthy child was born safely. This event became a turning point. It was an act of healing that demonstrated the profound inner transformation he had undergone. The power that healed the woman came not from magic, but from the immense power of a mind that has been completely purified of ill will. From that day on, Ahimsaka's meditation deepened immensely. He continued to bear the consequences of his past, but he did so with a joyful patience, knowing that he was purifying his mind and helping others through his very presence. He would often go into the forest, the same forest where he had once been a figure of terror, and sit in deep meditation. The animals which had once fled from his scent would now come and sit near him, unafraid, drawn to the powerful field of loving kindness that radiated from him. He had truly become Ahimsaka, the harmless one. In the end, through his diligent practice, his patient endurance, and his profound compassion, he did what had once seemed impossible. The man who had been the most feared killer in the land washed away all his mental defilements and reached the ultimate goal. He became an arhat, a fully enlightened being, experiencing the perfect, unshakable peace of nirvana in this very life. His story became a legend, a testament not to the darkness that humans are capable of, but to the infinite capacity for transformation, the infinite power of compassion, and the profound truth that no one, no matter how far they have fallen, is beyond the reach of redemption. His life became a teaching that echoed through the ages, that the greatest victory is not in conquering others,
but in conquering the hatred and violence within one's own heart. This profound victory, however, was not the end of Ahimsaka's story. It was the beginning of his true legacy. The peace of nirvana was not a state of blissful detachment from the world, but a boundless wellspring of wisdom and compassion that now flowed through him, touching everyone he encountered. Though he had attained the highest spiritual goal, he continued to live the simple, humble life of a monk. He continued to walk for his daily alms, and though the stones and insults became less frequent as his story of transformation and healing spread, they never stopped entirely. There were always some for whom the wound was too deep, the memory too raw. And Ahimsaka continued to meet their anger with the same unwavering, patient compassion. He saw their rage not as an attack on him, but as a cry of their own deep, unhealed suffering. His calm presence became a silent teaching for the other monks in the community. They saw him return day after day, his body bruised but his spirit radiant, and they began to understand the true meaning of non-retaliation and forgiveness. His practice was a living sutra, more powerful than any words written on a palm leaf. One day, a young, earnest monk named Subhuti, who was struggling deeply with his own anger and impatience in meditation, approached Ahimsaka. He found the enlightened monk sitting peacefully under a Bodhi tree, mending a tear in his robe with slow, mindful stitches. "Venerable Sir," Subhuti began, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and frustration, "I do not understand. I have never harmed anyone in my life, yet my mind is a raging storm. I cannot find a moment of peace. You, who have lived through so much darkness, now sit in such profound stillness. How is this possible? How did you tame the monster within you?" Ahimsaka paused his sewing and looked up, his eyes holding a gentle, knowing light. He did not offer a complex philosophical answer. Instead, he said, "I did not tame the monster, Subhuti. I learned to listen to it. The monster was born from pain, from a feeling of being wronged, from a desperate desire for an identity, however terrible. When I was Angulimala, I was running from that pain, and my running created more and more suffering. The Buddha taught me to stop running." He pointed to a small, thorny weed growing near the base of the tree. "When you see a weed in the garden," he said, "you can try to tear it out with force, but often the roots remain and it grows back stronger. This is what I was doing with my anger. But there is another way. You can gently, patiently dig around the weed, loosening the soil, understanding its roots, and then, with gentle care, you can lift it out completely, root and all. The hatred and violence within me were the thorny plant. The Buddha's compassion was the tool that loosened the soil of my heart, and my own patient endurance was the act of lifting it out, root and all. Your anger is a weed, Subhuti. Do not fight it. Listen to it, understand its roots, and offer it the gentle care of your own compassion. This simple teaching transformed Subhuti's practice. He stopped fighting his thoughts and started listening to the suffering from which they arose, and slowly his own inner storm began to quiet. Ahimsaka's compassion was not limited to humans. He spent much of his time in the Jalini forest, the place of his former terror. The forest, which had once been a symbol of death, became his sanctuary, a place of deep communion with life. He would sit in meditation for days on end, and the creatures of the forest would gather around him. A deer, once paralyzed by the scent of a predator, would lie down peacefully near his feet. A family of monkeys, who had chattered in alarm at any human presence, would now play in the branches above his head, their curiosity untinged by fear. He had a particular connection with a pack of wild dogs that roamed the forest, gaunt and fearful creatures that were hunted by villagers. Ahimsaka would leave a portion of his alms for them each day. At first, they would only approach after he had left, snatching the food with suspicious snarls. But over many months, they began to trust him. They would sit at a distance while he meditated, their watchful eyes slowly softening. One day, the pack's alpha female, her body thin and her leg injured from a villager's trap, limped towards him and in an act of profound trust, laid her head on his lap. Ahimsaka gently tended to her wound, his touch as calming as a mantra. From that day on, the pack became the unofficial guardians of his quiet solitude, their presence a testament to the fact that the language of loving kindness is understood by all beings, even those who have only ever known fear and violence. He had transformed the forest's energy from a place of hunting and being hunted to a place of mutual, peaceful coexistence. The story of the healing of the woman in childbirth became widely known, and people from all over the kingdom began to seek Ahimsaka out, not as a former killer, but as a powerful healer. They would come to him with their sicknesses, their sorrows, and their fears. Ahimsaka never claimed to have magical powers. His method of healing was always the same. He would first listen, deeply and completely, to their story of suffering. He would listen without judgment, without offering easy solutions, simply providing the vast empty space of his presence for them to pour their pain into. Then, he would guide them to generate compassion for their own suffering. The fever is not your enemy, he might say to a sick man. It is your body's effort to heal. Be kind to your body. Thank it for its hard work. Finally, he would guide them in the practice of truth-speaking, just as the Buddha had taught him. He would help them find a small, undeniable truth within their own lives. I have never intentionally wished harm upon my children, or I have always tried to be honest in my dealings, and guide them to state this truth with a focused, compassionate heart. The act of connecting with their own innate goodness, even in a small way, often had a profoundly healing effect, calming their minds and allowing their body's natural healing capacities to flourish. He was not healing them with power. He was teaching them to heal themselves with the power of their own purified intention.
Years passed, and Ahimsaka grew old, his body becoming a gentle landscape of frailty, his movements slow and mindful. King Pasenadi, also now an old man, would often visit him at the monastery, not as a king visiting a monk, but as one old friend visiting another. They would sit together in silence, watching the sunset paint the sky with colors of impermanence. One evening, the king confessed a deep, lingering fear. "Venerable sir," he said,
his voice heavy with the weight of his years and his crown. I have lived a life of power and comfort. I have tried to be a just ruler. But now, as my end approaches, I am filled with a great fear of death. You, who have faced the greatest darkness, seem to have no fear. How do you find such peace in the face of the ultimate unknown?" Ahimsaka looked at his old friend, his eyes filled with a deep, gentle empathy. "Your Majesty," he began, "I once feared death more than any man, for I believed it was the final judgment, the ultimate punishment for my terrible deeds. When I ran from the Buddha, I was not just running from a monk, I was running from the death of my identity as the mighty Angulimala. But the Buddha taught me that we do not die just once at the end of our lives. We die and are reborn in every single moment." He picked up a fallen leaf from the ground. Its vibrant green now faded to a brittle brown. "This leaf is not afraid of becoming earth," he said. "It has finished its dance with the sun and the wind, and now it returns to the soil to give life to new leaves. It does not cling to its leafness. It understands its part in the great, endless cycle. When I was Angulimala, I clung desperately to my identity, to my power, to my very life. The practice of mindfulness taught me to let go, moment by moment. To let go of the angry thought, to let go of the painful memory, to let go of the pleasant sensation. I have practiced dying 1,000 times a day in my meditation. And in this constant letting go, I have discovered that what I truly am is not the leaf, but the entire forest. The soil, the root, the branch, the new leaf, and the space in which it all happens. When you know you are the entire forest, what is there to fear in the falling of a single leaf? The king sat in deep silence, the simple analogy untying a knot of fear that had been tightening in his heart for years. He looked at Ahimsaka, not as a former killer, but as the wisest teacher he had ever known. A man who had walked through the fires of hell and emerged carrying the cool water of enlightenment. In his final days, Ahimsaka chose to return to the Jalini forest for the last time. He made a simple shelter of leaves at the base of a great banyan tree, near the stream where the Buddha had first spoken to him. The monks from the monastery would bring him a small amount of food each day, and they would find him always in a state of serene, radiant peace. The animals of the forest, his silent companions, were his final congregation. As his body grew weaker, his spirit seemed to grow even more luminous. One evening, as the last rays of the sun filtered through the canopy, Subhuti, now a senior monk himself, sat with him. "Master," Subhuti whispered, "is there any final teaching you wish to share?" Ahimsaka, his breath now shallow, opened his eyes one last time. A faint, gentle smile touched his lips. He did not speak. He simply raised one hand and pointed, not at a scroll, not at a statue, not at anything tangible. He pointed at the vast, profound silence of the forest, the silence that held the whisper of the wind, the murmur of the stream, and the beat of their own hearts. It was his final, wordless sermon. The truth is not in a sound, but in the silence that allows all sounds to be. Then, with one last gentle outbreath, his hand lowered, and he was gone. His physical form, the leaf, had fallen, but his presence, the essence of the forest, remained, merging completely with the great, compassionate stillness he had come to embody. And in that ultimate peace, the peace of a life fully transformed,
of a journey completed, of a return to the source, you too can now let go and find your complete rest. The story of Ahimsaka is complete. The struggles, the battles, the victories, all have dissolved back into silence. And so too can the story of your day dissolve. The meetings, the conversations, the worries, the to-do lists, they are all just fallen leaves from a day that is now past. There is no need to hold on to them. Let them fall. Let them become the soil for a night of deep, restorative rest. Feel the vast, quiet forest of peace that is your own true nature. It is here, within you, always. It is the silence beneath your thoughts, the stillness beneath your feelings. You do not need to create it. You only need to return to it. Allow your body to sink deeper and deeper into comfort, into safety, into profound relaxation. Let each breath be a gentle step further into this inner sanctuary. The path is clear, the way is open, the silence is calling you home. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to solve. Simply allow yourself to be held by the great, quiet, loving presence of the night. Surrender to the stillness. Surrender to the peace. Surrender to sleep. Deeply, completely, and peacefully sleep.